Hey, the program you're watching tonight is I Love My Job, and my special guest tonight is Don Graham, and he loves not his job, he loves his jobs, plural. Don, thank you very much for being on I Love My Job.
You're very welcome, and thanks for having me.
You've had and still do a long, extensive, and most interesting career.
I've had a blessed career, I really have, all the way back from the days when I was the head football coach in Willard, and essentially from that developed a business, and I've been in the financial services business now for 36 years. I have a wonderful staff and have offices in 4 different communities, and then in addition to that, I serve as the president of economic development. I have done that for 10 of the last 11 years, and then I'm also the president of the Ashland University Gridiron Club, and I broadcast their football games on the weekend.
Wow. You got plenty on your plate.
Well, I love to be busy,
yeah.
And as my wife says, I haven't learned how to say no.
Yeah. Well, you're a versatile guy and interesting, and you've got a lot to offer, and we thank you for those contributions. Well, let me go back and just talk about a few of those things before we get into the restoration of the Willard clock, which you're very instrumental in. Ashland University, tumultuous changes over there.
Yeah, a lot of changes taking place at the university. It's a wonderful institution. The institution will always survive anything that takes place in terms of changes that might be happening at the top or changes that might be happening in any place at the university. So, when I look at my relationship with the university is one of just loving the university, loving the education I got there, and always having great respect for the people.
It's a beautiful, beautiful campus.
It is a great campus, and like most small colleges and universities today, that it's a tough bullet that they're trying to bite right now with respect to keeping their enrollment up, making sure that they keep quality staff there, have the kind of facilities that the students are going to appreciate, and certainly in my role there as a president of the Gridiron Club and my relationship with the football program, we are so very blessed. A few years ago, we were able to raise privately the money to build the new $24 million stadium there.
Yeah,
and
beautiful.
The complex. It's just first class in every way. It's been a very, very big part of the campus, and we really felt that it would really raise and elevate the esprit de corps on campus with the student body. And I know from our Gridiron Club standpoint, I have 29 persons on that board, and they all work very, very hard to make sure that we involve the students in the kinds of things that give them a great experience there at Ashland University.
Okay, now as far as your personal business, tell us about that.
I have been a financial advisor since the late 1970s, and have grown that business. Today we manage well over $200 million. We have offices in 4 different communities. We have an office in Ashland, our main office is in Willard, we have an office in Strongsville, and we have an office in Norwalk. And I have some bright people around me in that business. My wife has been in that business with me for 36 years now. And we are just so blessed. Our clients are family, and my specialty is in retirement income planning.
Okay. So originally you started as a head football coach at Willard.
I did. I came to Willard from Massillon. I was an assistant coach at Massillon. Prior to that, I came right out of college in 1969. And Fred Martinelli was my coach in college.
Good old Fred.
My dad was a great football coach in Northern Ohio for over 30 years, and I was a chemistry physics major and was already ready to go to dental school, and had been accepted at Ohio State in pre-dentistry, and I basically decided I would interview for the head football coaching job at Monroeville High School just for the experience. And, heck, I could teach chemistry and physics. Not very many coaches could do that.
No. You were rare.
Yeah, plus they asked me the key question in the interview, well, if you really get stumped, would you call your dad?
Yeah.
I said, I would call my dad. I'd call Coach Martinelli, and they said, you're hired.
Yeah.
And so I thought that would be a lot of fun, and we won the first game after they had lost 16 games in a row prior to that. And of course, most people know that Monroeville's been in the playoff numerous times since then.
Absolutely.
So I went from there to Clyde Senior High School after 2 years, and then I had an undefeated season in my second year there.
Yeah.
And then at age 24, I became the youngest head coach ever in the All-American Football Conference, back with Massillon, Camp McKinley, Niles, Steubenville, all those schools that were in that great conference.
Yeah. I want to continue. I got to take a quick break.
Go
Somebody's
ahead.
got to pay for this, okay? We're talking to Don Graham. from Willard, Ohio, and we're going to really talk about one of the issues that challenges he's involved in, and it's restoration of a clock, and we're going to talk about that later, but we're kind of getting a little background on Don and his career. We're coming right back with Don Graham right after this special message. Once again, the program you're watching is I Love My Job with Don Graham. Okay, I cut you off. I want to hear about your career, your football career.
Well, when I went from Alliance as their head coach for a couple years, I went over to Massillon one year as an assistant coach. So a good friend of mine, Chuck Schuff, was the head coach there. And I had been a head coach 6 years right out of college, and I really needed a little break at that time. And so I went over to Massillon. It was a great place to coach, especially as an assistant coach. You didn't have to do the Boosters Club. You didn't have to do all those things. But then the people in Willard who, back when I was head coach at Clyde, had offered me the job there, and I had refused it because I had a great team coming back at Clyde, came to me and asked me if I would come and help them to lay out a blueprint for improving their football program to be on par with the great basketball program they had there.
Oh,
at the
yeah,
Bob House.
absolutely.
And so I came back and met with the board and just had fun doing that. My wife is from Willard. I have a lot of friends in Willard. At that time, I had some great boosters there. And I outlined a plan for them, and then they drove down to Massillon a couple days later and said, "We want you." And so my wife and I at that time were ready to come home. And her folks lived north of Willard at Holiday Lakes, and we just we knew it was time. And so we came back, and we've loved it ever since we came back there. I coached there for 5 years and coached them to their first NOL outright championship in 36 years. And I retired at the end of that school year because I had gotten into the financial services business part-time. And all of a sudden I had over 400 clients just working part-time and realized that I had to make that a full-time career.
Yeah, it was just too much. But so now you're in Willard, and you're the economic development guru, president, okay. And talk to us about that. How are things going?
Well, it's good. We developed our economic development group called Willard Economic Development Corporation back about 11 or 12 years ago. And we have really, our purpose is certainly to look at whatever opportunities we would have into the future of bringing other companies and employers into our community and taking care of the ones that we have. But also at the same time, in our mission statement, we talk about the remembering the legacy of the past. And so the legacy of the past would be all the things that we've had in the community that we need to be prideful of and try to preserve as much as we possibly can. And thus, that's what brought about the Clock Tower project.
The clock, yeah. You know, I thought it was interesting. I was reading the history that you gave me, and Willard was really not the name of the town.
It was not. You know, back prior to 1916, 1917, Willard was called Chicago Junction. In fact, Doug, if you go back and look at all the old archive pictures, Willard was a very robust, large city.
Wow.
And it was the main switching point between Baltimore and Chicago on the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad line. But every railroader in the United States of America knows today and knew back then, you know, how robust Willard was and what a big part it was. We're one of only 2 double hump switching yards in the whole United States of America. And we have 110 trains per day that go through our community. And it's still today, in this day. And so we're very blessed and to have that, as well as have those great companies we have in Willard with the great employment base that we have there.
You know, one time I can remember, too, of going to Willard, and wasn't there a dormitory for railroaders?
There was. The YMCA was built there. It was built in a new $6 million facility that was built with a restaurant, meeting facilities, gymnasium, and dormitories for the railroaders to stay overnight that were switching from the east-west bound trains. And so it was very robust at that time.
Now, how far back would we go for that?
Well, that would have been built in the 1980s.
Okay.
All right. And today it's vacant, unfortunately.
Yeah.
The railroad merged with another branch of another railroad, and in their contract, they said that they could not stay any closer than a certain distance from the rail yards for reasons of safety, and so they built a motel out on 224, a Country Inn, at Country Hearth and Inn out there, and I think the railroad occupies as many as 75 of 100 rooms per night out there. But in the meantime, the YMCA building was vacated, and we're hoping today in our community that there's a lot of interest in that building right now, to try to use it for some other resource right now.
We're talking once again to Don Graham from Willard, Ohio. A long, extensive career, and he still is active in a variety of financial, economic development, a lot of things. We're going to continue to talk to Don and got a lot more stories about a clock restoration. What's that all about? We're going to find out. Hey, welcome back to I Love My Job. Once again, we're talking to Don Graham. And Don, you're a fascinating character. There's a lot of things we could ask you, but one of the main reasons that we asked you to come on this particular show and talk to us about is this clock restoration that you're deeply involved in.
I am, and I'm very, very blessed to be involved with this. A gentleman by the name of Rick Reed, who was a former citizen of our community, now lives over in Indiana, really has a great passion for saving the old original clock that was on the city building that was built back, where the clock was built and dedicated back in 1914. Rick called me and knew that I had been pretty instrumental in a lot of the fundraising things for other projects in the community, and certainly knew how involved I was with economic development, and told me what he would like, what the plan was, and I said, I'd love to help you with that plan, and on a local basis. Rick has some difficulty in getting into the community that often, so I've been sort of carrying the bucket with the water in it, so to speak, in Willard, and Rick and I talk quite often, a couple times a week, and he's done a marvelous job in putting together the history, some of the YouTube videos and things that really promote what we're trying to accomplish. I also have to say that when you look at the rendering of the clock tower project that we're proposing, that Janata and Herner out of Monroeville, who was very instrumental in building the new expansion of Pepperidge Farm, where Pepperidge is almost doubling their footprint in our community with their facilities. They've been very, very helpful in helping us with the diagrams and answering questions for us about the construction.
Boy, it amazes me. I'm reading the notes that you sent. Originally, that clock cost over $1,000 back in 1914 or 1917. Wow,
Doug,
that was a lot of money.
Oh, think about that. Back in that day, that was a very, very expensive clock. And of course, it's a Seth Thomas piece, which is most clock people, those clock enthusiasts out there would really thirst to have a Seth Thomas piece. We have all the original clock mechanism preserved, and we will certainly have that mechanism in the new tower. But I would say to you that it's going to be virtually impossible for us to use that mechanism to run the clock. This new clock tower is going to be 45 feet tall. We will have the mechanism sitting in the bottom of the clock tower with an observation window, and it will be a running mechanism. But our clock will probably run by modern electronics at the top of the tower. And that we're going to preserve as much as we can. The bell from the original clock is still there. Some of the pieces are there. We'll have those on display. But the original clock mechanism is the piece that's the centerpiece. And we'll have that. People can walk up to the window and look into that mechanism working. And there will be a rod running to the top as though it's running the clock. And most people who visit won't know the difference. But I think it makes sense. We can't have somebody crawling up to the top of the clock once a week to try to reset it if the time was not incorrect.
And four sides.
Four sides. We're going to really, what we'll actually do in this tower is it's going to be about 45 feet tall. tall enough to be above the buildings that are adjacent to it. It sits right on the same footprint as the old original clock. The city building was raised there, and they've now since planted. The Girl Scouts have planted a nice little some planters in a little park there. We'll preserve that. They'll help us with that landscaping as we build the clock tower. But inside that clock tower, we'll also have a time capsule.
Okay. Whoa.
And so we'll have some things to memorialize the some interesting things about not only the clock tower, but the history of the community in that time capsule.
I need to take another commercial break. Once again, we're talking to Don Graham. We're talking about restoration of a clock dating back to 1914 in Willard, Ohio. And we'll be back with Don right after this. Ready. The program you're watching tonight is I Love My Job, and we're with Don Graham from Willard, Ohio, and we're talking about a clock dating back to 1914, and you're trying to restore it. And the weight of the motor alone was 500 pounds.
Well, the weight of the motor and the weight of the bell were the two primary reasons that we really felt that we needed to probably bring it down off the old city building. And because the city building was being moved to a different part of town, to a new city building, and the old city building was going to sit there. Hopefully would have been occupied, but eventually it was not, and it got raised. And so, but we had, in the meantime, had taken the bell and the clock mechanism and the clock face and all that we could down off the top of it and saved it.
Yeah, you got some pictures? Do we have some pictures, Grayson? Okay, well, we're going to continue to talk, okay? All right. Anyway,